What came first, myth or religion? It's a question that cuts to the heart of human history. Myths are often dismissed as mere stories, while religion is seen as sacred truth. But what if the two are more connected than we think? In this video, we dive deep into ancient cultures, sacred texts, and symbolic tales to explore how myths and religion shaped one another. Were myths the foundation on which religions were built? Or did religion give rise to the myths we now study? Join us as we uncover the fascinating origins of belief itself. From the earliest campfires to the soaring cathedrals and sacred temples of today, humanity has always sought to make sense of the unknown. At the heart of this search are two ancient and powerful systems, myth and religion. But which came first? Did myths emerge as the first attempt to explain the world? Symbolic stories told before the rise of organized religion? Or was it religion, a system of worship and devotion, that gave rise to mythic narratives meant to express divine truth? This question is more than academic. It touches on the very roots of human consciousness, culture, and civilization. Understanding which came first opens a door to how early humans thought, felt, and related to the world around them. Let's begin by understanding what we mean by myth and religion, and then dive into the history, anthropology, and psychology that inform this age-old debate. Defining the terms, myth and religion. Myths are traditional stories, often involving gods, heroes, or supernatural forces, used to explain the origins of the world, natural phenomena, human behavior, and cultural traditions. Myths are symbolic, rich in metaphor, and often passed down orally before being written. Religion, on the other hand, is a structured system of beliefs and practices centered on the divine, sacred, or supernatural. Religion usually includes rituals, moral codes, sacred texts, and communal worship. While myths can exist outside of religion, as folklore, literature, or cultural narrative, most religions use myths to convey their teachings. This overlap often causes confusion, but also points to their deep interconnection. Myths, the earliest maps of meaning? Long before the rise of organized religion, early humans were already storytelling creatures. Archaeological evidence, such as cave paintings in Lascaux, France, or the burial sites at Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, suggests that symbolic thinking existed tens of thousands of years ago. These early artifacts hint at a worldview infused with mythical thinking. In these prehistoric cultures, myths served as explanatory tools. Why does the sun rise and set? Why do people die? What causes storms or earthquakes? Where did humans come from? Without science, these questions beg for answers, and myth provided them. A thunderstorm wasn't just weather. It was the voice of a sky god. Death wasn't an end. It was a passage to another realm ruled by ancestral spirits. These stories gave emotional comfort, social order, and moral instruction. In this view, myth predates religion. Myths were the earliest framework for understanding life, and over time, as these stories gained sacred status and were ritualized, they evolved into formal religions. The birth of religion for myth? One argument for myth coming first is that religion is myth formalized. Early tribes may have told stories about the moon or ancestors. As those stories became sacred and were tied to rituals, e.g., harvest festivals, funerals, they became religious. For example, the Sumerians circa 3000 BCE had myths about gods like Enki and Inanna, who governed natural elements and human fates. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were ritual blueprints and political tools. Temples were built, priesthoods established, and offerings made. Myth became religion. In ancient Egypt, myths about Osiris and the afterlife eventually informed elaborate burial rites, beliefs in divine kingship, and the idea of moral judgment after death, all foundational elements of religion. Thus, religion may have emerged as an institutionalized version of myth, a way to maintain social cohesion, political control, and cosmic order. Or did religion give birth to myth? But there is another perspective. Some scholars argue that religious experience precedes myth. According to psychologist Carl Jung and theologian Rudolf Otto, early humans experienced something called the numinous, a direct sense of awe, fear, and wonder at the sacred or divine. These profound spiritual experiences needed to be expressed, and the only language early humans had was symbolic, myth. In this view, religion begins not with a story, but with a mystical experience, perhaps in nature, during a dream, or in moments of intense emotion. Over time, these experiences are shared, ritualized, and told as myths. The myth becomes a retelling of a sacred moment, not the origin of it. For example, the Prophet Muhammad's experience in the cave, 610 CE, is a direct religious encounter. Later stories and interpretations, both within and outside Islamic tradition, develop mythic dimensions. Similarly, Moses at the burning bush or the Buddha's enlightenment are initially spiritual experiences that later become encased in rich narrative forms. In this view, religion births myth, not the other way around. Are myth and religion simply two sides of the same coin? Perhaps the question of what came first is misleading. Maybe myth and religion are not in competition, but co-evolving systems. Joseph Campbell, one of the most influential mythologists of the 20th century, argued that myths are the masks of God, ways in which different cultures express the same spiritual truths. For Campbell, myths serve religion by giving form and language to the mystery of existence. This idea echoes the functionalist view of myth and religion. Both serve the same purpose, to help humans live with meaning, cope with suffering, establish community, and connect with something greater than themselves. In traditional societies, myth, religion, law, and science were not separate categories. They were woven together into a single worldview. For the ancient Greeks, the story of Demeter and Persephone wasn't just a tale. It explained the seasons, justified religious rituals, and provided a moral lesson. It was only in modern times, with the rise of science and secular thought, that we began to separate myth as untrue from religion as truth. In ancient contexts, both were seen as equally valid pathways to wisdom. Cultural examples. The dance of myth and religion. Let's look at a few cultural examples to illustrate how myths and religion intertwine. Hinduism. The Vedas and epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana are filled with mythic stories of gods, demons, and cosmic battles. These are not just tales. They shape temple rituals, festivals, and daily prayers. Hinduism shows how myth and religion can exist in seamless unity. Norse mythology. Stories of Odin, Thor, and Loki were deeply spiritual for the Vikings. While we now read them as mythology, they functioned religiously, explaining the world and guiding action, sacrifice, and afterlife beliefs like Valhalla. Christianity. Some scholars view parts of the Bible, like Genesis or Revelation, as containing mythic structures: creation, fall, flood, apocalypse. These stories operate both as sacred history and symbolic truth. In this sense, Christianity is built on mythic foundations, even as it distinguishes itself as a religion. Indigenous traditions. For many indigenous peoples, there is no division between myth and religion. The Dreamtime stories of Australian Aboriginals or the Kumalipo chant of Hawaiian creation are both sacred and explanatory. They guide life, law, land stewardship, and ceremony. Myth and religion in the modern world. Today, we often pit myth against religion, as if one is fantasy and the other is faith. But that division is relatively recent. In the ancient world, people lived in a symbolic universe where myth and religion danced together. In modern times, science has taken over many of the explanatory roles once held by myth and religion. We now know why it rains or how diseases spread, but we still turn to myth and religion to ask the big questions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of life? What happens after we die? These are not scientific questions. They are existential. And whether through myth or religion, humans continue to seek answers. Even popular culture creates new myths, superheroes, fantasy worlds, epic sagas. These modern myths reflect our fears, hopes, and moral values, much like ancient myths once did. Religion, too, evolves. New movements, spiritual practices, and reinterpretations of ancient texts show that the religious impulse is still alive, just finding new forms. So what came first, myth or religion? This question has intrigued scholars, philosophers, theologians, and curious minds for centuries. It invites us to peer deep into the origins of human culture and consciousness. However, focusing solely on which came first risks missing a more profound inquiry. Why did either arise at all? The answer to that question is not found simply in archaeology, ancient texts, or the study of rituals. It lies deep within the human heart and mind. Both myth and religion emerge from fundamental human needs that shape not only our understanding of the world, but our very identity as social, spiritual beings. This discussion is about more than origins. It is about the timeless dialogue between myth and religion, between story and faith, between the symbolic and the sacred. Together, they express the eternal human yearning to understand, to belong, and to transcend. The roots of human longing, understanding, belonging, and transcendence. At the core of both myth and religion is a set of deeply human impulses. These are the need to understand, the need to belong, the need to transcend. Each of these motivations drives us to create stories, rituals, and systems of belief that give life meaning beyond mere survival. 1. The need to understand, making meaning out of mystery. From the dawn of consciousness, humans have faced mysteries that defy immediate explanation. What is the origin of the cosmos? Why do natural disasters occur? What causes life and death? What is the purpose of human existence? These questions are not simply intellectual curiosities. They press on us with an urgency that cannot be ignored. Unlike other animals, humans possess the unique capacity, and perhaps the burden, to reflect on existence itself. Early humans encountered a world filled with unpredictable forces: thunder, lightning, the sun's movement, the changing seasons, birth, illness, and death. Without scientific knowledge, these phenomena demanded explanations, or else they remained terrifying and meaningless. Mythic storytelling emerged as a natural human response. Myths gave voice to the unknown through symbolic narratives. They personified natural forces as gods or spirits, turning chaos into a coherent story. For example, the ancient Greek myth of Zeus, as the god of the sky, and thunder provided a symbolic explanation for storms. Indigenous stories about the sun and moon's journey across the sky offered a framework for understanding day and night. Myths functioned as cognitive tools, not just fanciful tales, but frameworks to interpret the world. They provided answers, but also ways to ask questions about the nature of reality. Religion, in this light, developed when such myths became sacred. When the stories about divine beings and cosmic order were integrated with rituals, moral codes, and communal worship, they transformed into living systems of faith. Religion codifies, organizes, and institutionalizes the impulse to understand through sacred narrative. Thus, myth and religion arise as twin responses to the same human need: the quest for meaning amid mystery. 2. The need to belong. Creating community through shared stories and rituals. Humans are inherently social creatures. Our survival depends on cooperation, communication, and shared identity. Myth and religion both play vital roles in forging social cohesion. Myths are often more than personal stories. They are collective narratives. They tell a community where it came from, who its ancestors were, and what values it holds sacred. The telling and retelling of mythic stories creates a shared memory, a cultural heritage passed down through generations. Religion takes this a step further by establishing communal rituals and organized worship. These practices foster belonging and identity on multiple levels. They unite individuals around shared beliefs and sacred symbols. They provide social norms and moral guidance, strengthening group cohesion. They often incorporate rites of passage, birth, marriage, death, that mark individual membership in the community. Consider the example of the Jewish Passover, which commemorates the Exodus myth and reinforces a shared identity rooted in liberation and divine promise. Or the Hindu festival of Diwali, which celebrates the myth of light overcoming darkness and binds millions in joyful observance. In this way, myth and religion are fundamental to human culture and society. They answer not only the intellectual need to understand, but the emotional and social need to belong. 3. The need to transcend, connecting with the divine and the infinite. Beyond understanding and belonging, humans have a profound urge to transcend the limitations of their earthly existence. This impulse manifests as spirituality, mysticism, and the search for the divine. Myths often describe realms beyond ordinary reality, the underworld, heavens, or other spiritual planes. They depict heroes or gods who cross boundaries between mortal and immortal worlds. These stories symbolize a human yearning to break free from death, suffering, and finitude. Religion takes this further by providing practices and doctrines that allow believers to experience and participate in the sacred. Prayer, meditation, sacraments, and rituals open channels to transcendence, offering hope for salvation, enlightenment, or union with the divine. For example, the Christian myth of resurrection offers the promise of eternal life. The Buddhist story of the Buddha's enlightenment reveals a path beyond suffering. The Native American Vision Quest is a ritual journey towards spiritual insight and transformation. This desire to transcend is perhaps the most profound human motivation. It speaks to an awareness of mortality and a longing for meaning beyond the temporal world. The mutual dance of myth and religion. These three fundamental human needs, understanding, belonging, and transcendence, are not satisfied in isolation. Myth and religion address them simultaneously, often overlapping and evolving in a dynamic, interdependent relationship. Myths provide the symbolic language through which the sacred and the mysterious are expressed. Religion provides the institutional and ritual framework that makes these stories living realities within communities. Over time, what begins as oral myth may become sacred scripture. Rituals inspired by myth may become formalized religious ceremonies. The line between myth and religion is fluid, a dialogue rather than a division. The symbolic nature of myth and religion. Both myth and religion rely on symbols to communicate truths that transcend rational explanation. Symbols work on multiple levels. They convey abstract ideas through concrete images. They evoke emotions and spiritual insight rather than just intellectual understanding. They serve as bridges between the seen and unseen worlds. For example, the serpent in many myths and religious traditions symbolizes both danger and healing, death and rebirth. The cross in Christianity is both a historical instrument of execution and a symbol of redemption. This symbolic dimension is why myths remain relevant even in secular societies, and why religions continue to use stories, art, and ritual to express faith. Psychological perspectives. The inner dialogue. The human psyche craves narrative coherence. Psychologists like Carl Jung saw myths as expressions of a collective unconscious, universal patterns and archetypes embedded in the human mind. Religion, in turn, can be understood as a psycho-spiritual system that helps individuals integrate inner conflicts, cope with existential fears, and realize potential. From this viewpoint, myth and religion are parts of a continuous inner dialogue within each human being, a conversation between the conscious mind and the deeper symbolic wisdom of the unconscious. Why the question of which came first may be misleading. When asked what came first, myth or religion, we often expect a linear answer, like which came first, the chicken or the egg. But myth and religion are better understood as co-originating and co-evolving phenomena. They emerge from the same source, the human heart grappling with mystery. In some cultures, mythic storytelling clearly preceded formal religion. In others, religious experience inspired mythic narratives. Sometimes they developed hand in hand. The distinction between them is largely a product of modern categorization. Ancient peoples did not separate myth from religion the way we do today. For them, the stories, rituals, and experiences were all part of a single, integrated worldview. The enduring relevance of myth and religion today. In the contemporary world, scientific knowledge explains much about the physical universe, yet myths and religions remain vital. Why? Because science, while powerful, cannot fully answer the existential and spiritual questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? How do I face suffering and death? How do I find community and meaning? Myth and religion continue to provide narratives of meaning, moral guidance, and spiritual connection. Modern culture creates new myths through literature, film, and popular media that fulfill similar psychological and social functions. Religions evolve, adapt, and persist because they address the deepest human needs. A dialogue that never ends. The story of myth and religion is the story of humanity itself. It is a timeless dialogue, a dance of symbols, stories, rituals, and experiences that seek to make sense of existence. Rather than asking which came first, we benefit more by appreciating why both arose and why both endure. They arise because humans long to understand the unknown, to belong to a community, and to reach beyond the limits of mortal life. They endure because these needs remain as urgent now as ever. In that light, myth and religion are not opposing forces, but complementary expressions of the human spirit's eternal quest for meaning, connection, and transcendence. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the origins of belief. Whether myths gave birth to religion or religion shaped the myths we remember, one thing is clear. Both reflect our deepest questions about life, death, and the divine. They're not enemies, but different languages of the same human longing for meaning. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think came first, myth or religion? Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking the truths hidden in the stories we tell.